Welcome, everyone, to the life and crimes of H. Holmes. I'm James Thompson, and I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Emily Carter. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of H. Holmes, America's so-called first serial killer. Emily, let's start at the very beginning in Gilmanton, New Hampshire.
Absolutely, James. Holmes, born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861, grew up in a small rural town. His family was, by all accounts, quite strict. His father, Levi, was a disciplinarian, and his mother, Theodate, was deeply religious. There are stories of Holmes being both highly intelligent and socially isolated as a child. He was bullied, and there's that infamous incident with the skeleton in the doctor's office. Supposedly, some local boys forced him to touch it, and rather than being traumatized, he became fascinated by anatomy and death.
Yeah, that story comes up a lot. Whether it's exaggerated or not, it does seem to mark the start of his obsession with the macabre. By his teens, Holmes was dissecting animals and reading medical texts. It's a pattern we see in other criminal profiles, right?
Definitely. There's a recurring theme in criminal psychology. Early fascination with animal dissection or cruelty can be a red flag. Not always, of course, but in Holmes's case, it's one of those chilling details that, in hindsight, seems almost predictive.
So moving on, Holmes was academically gifted, but his school years weren't exactly smooth sailing. He attended Phillips Exeter Academy and then the University of Michigan's medical school. But, Emily, he wasn't exactly a star student, was he?
No, not at all. His grades were mediocre, but he thrived in the anatomy labs. That's where he really found his element. And it's also where his criminal tendencies started to emerge. He began committing insurance fraud using stolen cadavers, taking out policies, then claiming the bodies had died accidentally to collect the payout. There are even suspicions he was involved in some questionable deaths during this period, though the evidence is murky.
It's wild to think about. Using his medical training not just for healing, but as a tool for deception. Do you think his education made him a better criminal, or was it just a means to an end?
That's a tough one. I'd say it's both. The training gave him the technical skills, access to bodies, knowledge of anatomy, but the impulse to deceive, to manipulate, that was already there. The medical background just made his schemes more sophisticated.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the education didn't create the monster, but it certainly gave him sharper claws.
After medical school, Holmes's life takes another turn. He abandons his first wife, Clara, and their child, and moves to Illinois. That's when he adopts the name H. Holmes, a name that, interestingly, might have been inspired by Sherlock Holmes. There's something almost theatrical about it, don't you think?
Absolutely. Reinvention is a classic move for con artists and serial offenders. In Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, Holmes's charm really comes to the fore. He takes over a pharmacy under, let's say, mysterious circumstances. The previous owner's husband just vanishes. Holmes claims he moved away, but, well, no one really buys that.
It's a pattern we see in other serial killers too. Using aliases, constantly reinventing themselves to avoid detection. Holmes was a master at it. He could be whoever he needed to be to get what he wanted.
Yeah, and it's not just about hiding. It's about control. The ability to slip into new identities, to manipulate how others see you. That's a powerful tool for someone with Holmes's ambitions. Now let's talk about the infamous murder castle. Holmes buys an empty lot across from the pharmacy and starts construction in 1887. The building becomes this 3-story labyrinth. Secret corridors, trapdoors, even rumors of gas chambers, and a maze-like design. The media definitely exaggerated some of it, but there's no question it was uniquely sinister.
Right. And Holmes was incredibly calculated in how he built it. He kept firing and rehiring construction crews so that no one person knew the full layout. That's not just about secrecy. It's about control and perhaps psychological satisfaction. Was the castle built primarily for murder, for fraud, or just to satisfy Holmes's own twisted desires? It's hard to say for sure.
I mean, the fraud angle is real. He used hidden rooms to stash furniture he bought on credit and never paid for. But the design also allowed for some truly horrific acts. Even if the press embellished the details, the intent behind the structure was undeniably dark.
Exactly. Whether it was for profit, for murder, or for his own psychological games, the castle stands as a monument to Holmes's complexity and his cruelty. Holmes wasn't just a killer. He was a manipulator. He seduced, charmed, and gaslighted his victims and associates. He lured young women with promises of jobs or marriage, and then they'd simply vanish. There's evidence he compartmentalized his life, showing little to no remorse. His confessions shifted constantly, rationalizing his actions or blaming others.
Yeah, and that's classic psychopathy. Lack of empathy, superficial charm, and a tendency to rationalize or shift blame. Holmes's mindset was almost mechanical in its lack of feeling. He could be charming one moment and utterly cold the next.
Contemporary theories would probably diagnose him with a mix of psychopathy and narcissistic personality disorder. He needed to be in control, to be admired, and he had no qualms about using or discarding people. It's chilling, but it's also what made him so effective and so dangerous.
And it's that combination, intelligence, charm, and utter lack of conscience, that makes Holmes such a fascinating, if horrifying, figure. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair was a turning point. Suddenly, millions of people were pouring into Chicago, and Holmes's hotel was perfectly positioned to take advantage. The transient population made it easy for people to disappear without a trace.
Exactly. The myth is that countless fairgoers became victims, but the reality is a bit murkier. The media inflated the numbers, but there's no doubt Holmes used the chaos to his advantage. He rented rooms to visitors, many of whom were young women looking for work or adventure. Some never checked out, and their disappearances were easily masked by the sheer scale of the event.
It's a pattern we see in other cases too. Serial killers targeting transient populations, people who won't be missed right away. The World's Fair was the perfect cover for Holmes's crimes.
And the legend of the murder castle only grew from there, fueled by sensationalist journalism and the public's appetite for horror stories. Let's talk about the victims. Some of the confirmed and suspected names include Julia and Pearl Connor, Emmeline Sigrand, the Williams sisters, Minnie and Nanny, Benjamin Patersall and his children. Holmes's methods were varied: gas, poison, suffocation, dismemberment. He was notorious for profiting from murder, selling bodies to medical schools, or using them in insurance scams.
Yeah, and his victim selection was often practical. People who knew too much or who could be easily manipulated. But there's also a compulsive element. Some murders were about profit. Others seemed almost ritualistic. It's that blend of practical and compulsive motives that makes Holmes so hard to categorize.
And the sheer number of suspected victims, anywhere from 9 to over 200 depending on the source, shows just how effective he was at covering his tracks. The truth is, we may never know the full extent of his crimes.
Holmes's downfall came not from murder, but from fraud. The Patersall insurance scam was his undoing. He killed Benjamin Patersall, then murdered 3 of Patersall's children while trying to cover his tracks. That brought in law enforcement from multiple states, and the Pinkerton detectives eventually caught up with him in Boston in 1894.
Once in custody, Holmes gave a series of confessions, some true, some wildly exaggerated. He claimed to have killed 27 people, but many of those victims were later found alive. His statements were a mix of truth, lies, and grandiosity, making it nearly impossible to separate fact from fiction.
And that's part of his legacy, the way he blurred the line between reality and myth, even in his final statements. He was always performing, always manipulating the narrative.
Holmes's trial in 1895 was a spectacle. He acted as his own attorney, relishing the attention. He was ultimately convicted for the murder of Benjamin Petersall in Philadelphia and sentenced to death. Even at the end, he maintained a cool demeanor, claiming he was possessed by the devil. He requested to be buried in concrete to prevent his body from being dissected after death. A final act of control, perhaps.
Modern criminology looks at those final words and behaviors as classic signs of a narcissistic, manipulative personality. Holmes wanted to control his story, even in death. The mysteries around his true victim count, his motives, and even rumors that he escaped execution, they all add to the enduring fascination.
And the fact that his body was exhumed in 2017 to confirm his identity, well, it just shows how the questions around Holmes never really go away.
Holmes's legacy is massive. He's often called America's first serial killer, and his story has inspired books, documentaries, and urban legends. The murder castle itself became a symbol of evil, even though much of what we know about it is myth fueled by 19th century journalism and ineffective investigations.
It's a cautionary tale, really, about how sensationalism can blur the line between fact and fiction. But it's also a story about the psychology of evil. Visiting the current post office that stands where the castle once was, you can't help but feel the weight of history. It's what drew you to this case, isn't it, James?
Yeah, absolutely. Standing on that spot, you realize how thin the line is between ordinary life and unimaginable horror. Holmes's story reminds us that evil can wear a very convincing mask, and that's why we keep coming back to it.
And that's where we'll leave it for today. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the mind of H. Holmes. We'll be back soon with more stories from the dark side of history.
Thanks, Emily. Always a pleasure. And thank you to everyone listening. Take care, and we'll see you next time on The Life and Crimes of H. Holmes.